Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Palace podcast. I am your host today in a rare Uno reverse card. I am Daniel Tanner and I'm joined by Joe Lodge. So he gets to be in the hot seat for a change now. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good thanks. Good thanks, Dan. Nice to be Dan Tanner for the day. If you hear my voice sound a bit hoarse, it's I'm horribly dehydrated. I've been bored to floods of tears by Palace Bournemouth yesterday. But other than that, I'm very well.
Yeah, well, we might as well jump pretty much into it. So we're going to talk about the most boring Boxing Day game on the planet. Then we're going to bring the spirits back up, get the life back in their cheeks again, and try and talk about the upcoming game against Southampton, which hopefully should be a much better performance compared to the last two or three. And as it is nearing the end of 2024 and we are at the halfway stage of the season, we have a little look back just to see what we've made of the season so far and what we expect to see going forward in 2024 and in sort of the January transfer window, and can Palace sort of get out of the mess they've put themselves in. So let's jump straight into it with the most boring Boxing Day game on the face of the planet. Joe, do you want to talk us through it? I know you don't want to, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like kind of what is left to talk through. Obviously, Palace went and drew 0-0 away at Bournemouth. Actually, I think the top line is the way that Palace approached the game was very sensible, and the result is a good one. Bournemouth are now 6 games unbeaten, I think 4 wins in that run, and 6th in the table. So they're a strong side, and the way that they cause teams problems is that they press really aggressively. They make the game as chaotic as possible, and then it's always said, the kind of football analyst thing to say, it seems, from my Googling and going on those kind of Twitter pages and Tifo Football and all that kind of stuff, is they put themselves in the best positions to benefit from the chaos they create. So they back themselves to play better in chaos than any other team in the league, basically. And Palace prevented chaos. I mean, it was one of the least chaotic games of football I've ever seen. It was really uneventful. Both teams were sort of slowish in possession, which again I think was, I'm sure, deliberate from Palace to prevent that kind of chaos setting in, and they didn't push Bournemouth too hard or aggressively. Sat in deep, used the kind of quality of that back three just to bed in, prevent the chaos. Didn't take many risks on the ball, played it slowly, made it a really drab game of football, which Gay himself described as rubbish and boring for the neutral afterwards. But it's actually, Bournemouth isn't traditionally an intimidating place to go as long as you're not afraid of arcades and Zimmer frames. But this is a good result, I think, and yeah, Palace can be happy with that. But it was a really, really boring watch.
Yeah, if it's a 0-0 draw, so it's never ever going to be that exciting unless it's frantic. But this one didn't really seem to be that. It just kind of cancelling each other out. A lot more Bournemouth than Palace from what I gathered from it, because most of the stats were almost identical. So if you watch the highlights, it's a lot more Bournemouth than it is Palace. But you've got to take slight positive from it. It is our 3rd or 4th clean sheet of the season so far, so at least that's something we can say was good about the game. But other than that, it really just was one you could have just flicked over and just ignored completely. It's almost, well, from what I understand, BBC practically ignored it. I didn't really analyse it. End of the match of the day, and went, yes, it happened. Good night, everybody. And then
Yeah,
basically,
literally, I think there was one sentence of analysis. Gary Lineker going, addressing maybe Joe Hart, saying, "Yeah, better point for Palace than for Bournemouth, probably, Joe." And he goes, "Yeah, that's all from us. Good night."
it's just yeah. Oh,
It was a better point for Palace than it was for Bournemouth. I think, as you say,
mm,
Bournemouth did have the better of the chances, but that doesn't mean they had good chances. They just tried a lot of shots. Some of them kind of ricocheted through dangerously. But as I think Glasner said in his post-match press conference, no keeper on either team had to make any spectacular saves. It was a game of little to no chances, really. I guess the closest they came was there was that one sort of fairly poorly defended corner from Palace, which leads to a shot from, I think it's Semenyo, but might be wrong, which Sarr ends up clearing off a line. And then Sarr himself had the ball in the net for Palace, but was comfortably offside. And that was about as close as we came to getting off our seats and getting excited all match, really.
well, at the very least, we walked away with a point, but it's still, especially after the last two games against Arsenal, where I think it probably came out a little bit gun shy, really, when they just completely and utterly walked by Arsenal only a couple of days earlier. They're still getting over Christmas dinner, thinking about what they're going to go home to afterwards, kind of thing. It was very, very lackadaisical. Well, not obviously lackadaisical. It's just sort of cancelled each other out more than anything else. It was just literally, let's just try and stop each other. But yeah, just not a brilliant result, but it's what we've been slowly getting towards of actually just getting points on the board, which we still need to do because we are still very much in that relegation window. Definitely need to start getting a few more points on the board, which now we've gotten past our very nasty December. We can look into January, which is a little bit better. But on that note, we'll take a quick break to thank our provider here. And then after that, we'll try and get the spirits going as we're going to now talk about our game with the worst team in the league at the moment. So we'll be back in a second. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link below in the description to learn more about Zencaster. Well done. I fumbled that at the end, but that's all right.
That was good.
But yeah, we're back and we're going to pick up the pace a bit and we're going to start talking about the upcoming game on the weekend against Southampton. Hopefully we can start to put in a much better performance and actually try and get somewhere. Any thoughts on this, Joe? Like key players or sort of strategies or anything that's come to mind over researching it probably over the last couple of hours?
Yeah, so I think actually this could be quite an interesting game. What I've been focusing on in the preparation is just trying to understand sort of who Ivan Juric is, what his football's like, and what he wants to do for Southampton, because he's clearly a different type to Russell Martin. He's not going to be, I don't know if anyone sort of other than like the Pope has ever been as dogmatic and well, probably including the Pope really is committed to a set of principles as Russell Martin was to his passing football, and he wasn't working, and Southampton felt understanding they needed to change things up. Juric just sort of suggested in a nod to Jurgen Klopp that he's going to play death metal football at Southampton. That's the kind of genre he's into, which I think basically means, from what he said, high intensity, hard running, and direct. I don't think they're going to try and defend their way to safety, which is probably right for them in the position they're in, because they have got a serious points deficit to make up. They probably will have to go all guns blazing if they've got any chance of turning things around. disappointing result for them in the last game, wasn't it? That was 1-0 defeat at home to West Ham. But there were positives. So what he did was brought in Paul Onuachu, this 6'7" striker. They signed from Genk. I barely remember this in January 2023. Barely really played then. Still hasn't scored for Southampton, but was on loan. Has barely played this season. Was on loan last year at I want to say Trabzonspor in Turkey, and scored bags of goals his time there, and looks a real problem. So all game they were just same thing again and again and again, whipping balls into him in the air, and he was winning everything. And he was winning everything not very effectively. He probably should have scored a couple of headers, didn't quite get the purchase he wanted on them. But that, I would expect, showed enough promise as a strategy that Southampton might try it again. And if they do, that will affect how Palace have to play, I think. Because the way that Palace have played in a lot of games in recent weeks has been sitting in a fairly deep block and countering. Whereas if their strategy is just swinging balls into a target man, a deep block is not good. You're going to be letting them get close to your goal and pin your centre backs and get his head on things. Unless the wing backs can do a really good job of stopping Walker Peters and Sugawara on the Southampton end, who both have a really good delivery and some threat on them. So I think they'll have to both go for it. I think it'll be a bit of a gunslinging ding-dong kind of match. With that, I think the quality of Palace's back three and the higher quality of their attackers compared to Southampton means I'm fairly confident of a Palace win in this one, more so than I've been at any other point in the season. But I think they're interesting. Juric, he's an unknown quantity, really. How good he is, I think, is a bit up for debate. He seems like he talks well enough. He seems sensible, but like they considered appointing him before they appointed Nathan Jones, I read today. And if they decided, I think then they had a consultation with him, effective an interview, and decided to appoint Nathan Jones instead, unless David Brent himself is conducting it. I don't really know how you can perform worse in an interview than Nathan Jones presumably must have. So that makes you slightly worried about his credentials or style. But I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I think Palace will win. I think it'll be a much better game than the Bournemouth one.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with you all that much, but changing a manager isn't exactly a guarantee strategy to keep winning. Just ask Man United recently, who've just changed their manager, and basically the same problem still persists. So it's not a guarantee of just changing a manager will fix every problem, but they're definitely going to be a little bit more up to try and impress for the new gaffer, or even as the January transfer window is coming up, to try and get their sort of get themselves in the shop window a little bit, see if they can't try and get out of the sinking ship as it is at the minute. Because I think as it stands at the minute, they are probably the worst Premier League in history. I think they're on
Derby were.
They're on the verge of that same form of Derby in the early 2000s. Which
I think Derby probably did have more than 6 points at this stage because they won.
There wasn't much, but I think at some point they were only like halfway, 2/3 away through the season, and only still on single figures. So they were a pretty bad team back in the.
Yeah, no, I don't actually think Southampton are worse than that Derby.
Statistically, at the moment, they're
they're looking pretty
in that window. So, as you said, I'm fairly confident of a Palace win as well. It's almost like it's been circled in the schedule of this should be a relatively easy 3 points. Let's go and get it. We need to get back into winning ways, because we've got Chelsea after that, and then a couple of, let's just say, slightly more favourable ones coming up in January. So we need to start getting our act back together as well, after getting blown away by Arsenal twice in the space of 3 or 4 days. Yeah, I can it should be a Southampton. We should beat Southampton on this, but knowing us, we can go all Palace and just make it really, really difficult for ourselves when it shouldn't be. So my prediction, I think, is probably going to be a 2-1. I can see us scoring, but we have struggled to keep a clean sheet. And against Southampton, who are sort of, I think, only one win. I had this written down somewhere. It's something like 1 win, 3 draws, and 13 losses, and 1 point from the last 5 games. So it should be in our favour. Should be. Yeah. This is Palace, and if you've been around Palace long enough, anything can happen.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've gone with I've written down 3-1, but I think Palace will concede 1 because I think they'll have to be a bit more expansive and take the game to Southampton. As I said, for the reasons that the deep block will not be the best way to play against them, and why would you? Like, Palace are the better side in this occasion, in terms of personnel, etc. I think they will miss. He's suspended now, isn't he? I think he'll be a miss at the back, obviously, for yellow cards.
I think he's suspended. Yeah, the 5 yellows, but we've got Munoz back, and Eze should be called. Most of them, I think, had a.
Will Hughes could be a doubt, I guess, because he kind of came off a bit injured in Bournemouth. I think I'm not aware that we've had any further update on that. As far as I could see, there wasn't really any more information. But if he's injured, good low Decore did actually look when he came on against Bournemouth. It looks like he's getting back to speed, but still, I think the defence is well protected with Hughes at the moment in the form he's been in, so he'll be a miss too. But I think Palace just have too much quality, won't they, for Southampton?
Yeah, they seem to be up for it now. So if we've got to kind of play like we played against Newcastle and Ipswich and just kind of dominate the ball a little bit more, actually take our chances, get inside the box and make easy shots. Don't try and do any of these sort of worldy shots or anything. We don't need to be too technical. They just need to go in the back of the net, really. After the very, very boring display against Bournemouth, we need a better one on the South Coast.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we shall take a quick moment to thank the network who allow us to do this on a daily basis. And then we'll then have a look back over the last few months, some of our sort of what we've made of the season so far. This podcast is a part of Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football, and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day. And with that, we will take a little trip down memory lane and have a sort of very sort of freely discussion on what we think how the season's been going so far. Do we think is there any improvements we can do or anything like that? Just any real thoughts we've had over the last couple of days as we're now coming towards the halfway stage and the end of 2024. Joe, you got anything you want to bring up or?
Yeah, well, I think it's been a half season of 2 offs, hasn't it? I'm calling that the reverse deep fried Mars bar, which is the kind of the first half of this has been sort of unendurably horrible, and the second half's been okay, which is again the reverse of the experience of being a deep fried Mars bar, where first half is like fine and the second half is, oh my god, this is going to finish me off. I think the Spurs game was a big turning point. In terms of form, confidence, and probably tactics as well. So up until that point, Palace have played, 7 games before then, and not won one, got me 3 draws, and it's a team that looks increasingly concerningly bereft of ideas and confidence, and they look like they don't really know where they're supposed to be on the pitch. The defence on a different wavelength to the midfield, and they're just getting picked through. And yeah, trying to play the same really front-footed attacking football that saw Palace finish the season so well under Glasner the year before. And it just isn't quite working or gelling, either because of a loss of Michael Elise or because the team just haven't had enough minutes together after a lot of changes in the summer. Something isn't working. And then everything kind of clicked in that 1-0 win with Spurs. And I guess there were a couple of obvious tactical shifts there. Palace played much more on the counter, played deeper. And Sarr started that game. I'm not sure if that was like his first or second league start. And I think that kind of shift towards pace, directness on the counter, rather than the previous period of trying to pick their way through or press their way into opportunities with Nketiah and Eze behind Mateta, improve things. And I think, that's maybe the key shift in terms of the thinking and tactics that has allowed Palace to thrive. Is last season, the strongest thing about the team was the front three of Elise, Eze and Mateta, with Eze a bit struggling for fitness, Mateta not quite as level of last season, and Elise gone. Palace's strongest asset is probably now the back three. I made 2 really strong signings in Chalobah and Nakwa. So shifting to a more defensive style of play that, it is designed to kind of allow these 3 really good defenders to soak up the pressure and deal with balls into the box and all that kind of stuff, and then hit on the counter rather than trying to overwhelm teams with attacking brilliance. Suits Palace better in terms of the current squad. That's the way to maximise the strengths of their best players, I think, now. And I kind of think the obvious concern is just the squad being a bit thin in places. We'll have to change it. But if the key personnel stay fit for the season, I think Palace will be quite comfortably above the relegation zone come May. They've become really hard to beat, even if they don't win enough games yet. They've had a really tough run of 10 games, starting with that Spurs win. And they've played in that run. They've played like City, Newcastle, Villa, Spurs themselves, obviously, and Arsenal. It's half the games, and then other like surprise high flyers like Bournemouth, and they've managed 14 points. I think lost twice from it. And if Palace can keep up that kind of form, it'll be that difficult to beat. Rack up low draws and the odd win, they'll be fine. Not inspiring, not as good as we hope Palace could be at the start of the season, but I think that'll be fine.
Yeah, very much on the same wavelength. We started off fairly slow and fairly methodical. Wasn't overly exciting. But we weren't really, say, getting beaten. We were losing by 1 goal, 1-0 here and there. We got a couple of good draws. It was just not very sort of like inspiring to watch when you're getting the sort of watching the highlights the next morning, and it's like, why are you? It's just very, very, very simple, silly little mistakes let us down very early on, and they were sort of all very unforced errors as well. So it wasn't overly inspiring to sort of see that as we're sort of struggling at the beginning of the season. It took us like 8-9 games to get any real points on the board. But ever since, the Spurs game, and I think the cup run also helped us out a little bit as well, getting a good sort of scalp in Villa at Villa Park was a good one. So that boosted a bit of confidence. And I think the fight back, the 2-2 draw against Villa a couple of weeks later, I think that was probably one of the turning points as well. It was we sort of switched to hitting people on the counter instead of trying to force it. It was doing it at speed and at pace. Don't try and doesn't need to be clever. It just needs to get out of the 18-yard box kind of thing. And then sort of the dominant performance against Newcastle was a personal kind of highlight. Sort of you see all the stats, and we should have won that 4 or 5-0 quite comfortably, but somehow Palace being a Palace, and we walk away with a draw. So
yeah,
so,
I mean, you're right. Money Way is one of Palace's best performances of the season. That was quality. I mean, Newcastle didn't have a shot.
didn't have a shot, and we walk away with a 1-1 draw. So I'm going to keep bringing this up until somebody else does it. So everybody I've talked to on the crossovers are always surprised about that one. They go, "Hang on, yeah." So it's still promising. We've still got plenty of a season left. Definitely need to in the January transfer window. Probably do need a few reinforcements just to get a little bit of depth, particularly those sort of wing back positions, as I think you and me have brought up on several separate occasions. And I think this switch from putting Sarr starting instead of Nketiah has been a real sort of brainwave, almost like a genius play. Sort of you've got another sort of power forward up there with Mateta as well. So you've got some actual sort of physicality up front instead of just because Nketiah's handy and all that, but he's not exactly a physical specimen like Mateta or Sarr when he gets going. And it's very much on the same thing of if we can keep our star players, Eze and Gehi, relatively fit, or even at the club, because we do have January coming up, that could get interesting. If we can keep them, I think we should be fine. Just it's very much to plod along, keep going. We're not going to be doing any sort of spectacular runs of sort of beating a team 4 or 5-0 every weekend. If we can put out 2-1 victories, 1-1s and things like that, I'm perfectly happy with just cruising along and everybody minding our own business. So, any other final thoughts or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd echo all that, Dan. I think it's the priority is probably not losing people in January. I think Palace, realistically, you have so little time to replace quality, and you probably have to pay a premium to do so, that they should, even if it means getting less money for them ultimately, look to hold on to Gay and Eze in January and sell them in the summer if that is what they're ultimately going to have to do, and whatever agreement they might informally have with the players, and bringing in just reinforcements. I don't want necessarily a new starting wing back, a new starting centre mid, anything like that. Just a few positions where the team are a little weak. Maybe another creative kind of attacking midfield type player, because definitely there's a big burden on the fullbacks to create when Eze is not on the pitch. But yeah, just those areas that are specialised and important, and Palace can't really function without. They're pretty threadbare in right wing back, left wing back. So just someone with energy and quality to plug a gap, to give Munoz a rest, to give Mitchell a rest. I think that would be the most useful signing Palace can make in January, and again shouldn't cost an arm and a leg. I don't think they should be going for top quality. It's just reinforcements really. And the starting 11 as it is pretty sound.
So yeah, I think we would say we're in pretty much agreement. Most of the signings from the summer have been working out fairly well. Kamada's still trying to get into any kind of sort of form or any kind of sort of settling in bit. He's still struggling a bit, but we'll keep our fingers crossed for him. Most of the other ones, sort of Lacroix and Chalobah, have been doing fairly well. Now they've all sort of gelled as the three at the back kind of formation sort of system. So we are getting there. It's just getting a bit of consistency and just getting, as simply as getting the points on the board. So with that, I think we shall leave it there. I'd like to thank Joe for joining me today.
Thank you for hosting me, Dan.
No worries. normal we'll resume next time, so we should be back to a somewhat of a regularly scheduled program as of Monday. We'll go from there. We'll see what happens.
Nice to be back.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.